show that we're doing where we bring you the latest from the world of localization, the latest news, research, and events in a fun format where I, Sarah Hickey, your host, I go live every Monday at this time. So that is 6 in the evening if you're in Central Europe somewhere, or 9 in the morning if you're on the West Coast of the United States. And I will always have a lovely guest with me, usually one of my NIMSY colleagues, for example. Here with me today, I have Gabriel, our Chief Operating Officer. Say hi, Gabe.
Hi, everyone. It's super exciting to be here. We're breaking new ground, kind of, right, with these multi-platform live streams. So it's super, super exciting to be here.
Yeah. Breaking the ground there for us. He's actually running the show in the background right now.
Hello.
And yes, there's
I'm keeping
Tucker
an
in the
eye on you.
background running everything. I talked over you, Tucker. I'm sorry. Yeah, and so this is a new thing where I will be the host, but yeah, I don't want to focus on myself too much because that's why I have guests. But just a brief introduction to NIMSY in case you are not from the localization industry, or maybe you even are, but you still have never heard of NIMSY. We are a market research and consulting company. Largely focused on the language industry, but not exclusively. We do anything that has to do somewhat with language services, cultural consultations, and any kind of needs in that area. We do M&A advisory as well. So yeah, any of your research and insights needs really in this field. Okay, and today, to kick things off, we want to address a really central question, and that is English enough? So, Gabe, is it?
Oh, it's a difficult question, and one that I fundamentally think there's no right or wrong answer to. Only the kind of blanket answer is it's really going to depend on what your company does, what are your audiences, where you already are, as opposed to where you want to go. Don't let that fool you, though. Language professionals, they are here for a reason, and that is because people want to access the products and services in their own native language, and that's why we have the data to support it. And the data points in that direction, but there's more to it, I feel, than just saying yes or no. Is it enough?
Yes, and I was just going to ask you, and of course I know the answer to this question is if you have any data to back this up before we go into understanding the context of 21 and why this is particularly relevant right now. But just do you have any, I know you have some broader data on why English is not enough. Just hit us with a few of those.
Right, for sure. We have a couple of those key takeaways from one of our studies that we did, and actually multiple ones over time that we've done at NIMSY. And one of the ones we like to use the most is that 9 users out of 10, so that is 9 users out of 10 will ignore a product if it's not in their native language. And to me that paints a pretty convincing picture of where user preferences are. But then there's another one, in case you're still not convinced, and that is a little over 70% of users, and we're talking individuals like you and I, right? Who, if you're given a choice and you're on a website, or you're watching Netflix and you're picking what subtitle you put on, is you select the one in your native language as opposed to in English. Mm-hmm. So that's two pretty convincing arguments right there, I would say.
Yeah, that's a really huge figure. I mean, 9 out of 10, that's almost everyone, really, you could say. And I think it's maybe to most professionals in our industry, in the localization industry, this shouldn't be too surprising, but even there, occasionally, I guess you find We know that. But even for the ones who do speak English, why is it still not enough then to just offer your product or service in English?
Right. I would say, and to that, something that comes to mind is that different companies, they are at different stages of their life, right? They're just entering the market, startup just breaking ground with something innovative or putting a solution out there that's super new and interesting. And so there are new companies coming to the market that do not necessarily have this mindset of going global yet. So they're not at that stage where they're asking the question, like, should we go with multiple languages? So on one hand, you have the companies, on the other, you have the users. So there's a bunch of us already who are, and practically the language of the internet is English, right? So we're used to engaging with content in English. But imagine there's hundreds of millions of people who are yet to access the internet. And for them, they do not come in pre-formats as understanding, like, okay, I'm gonna watch something in English. Their reflex is, I want to do it in my native language. So it's a combination of these two forces, like the new companies coming to the fore and starting to expand or think about expanding, but also the people there's more and more people who want to consume the content, really. So this is why I feel like kind of, and now we're talking really about the context here, right, of what is happening in the, let's say, wider business world and these interactions between companies and consumers. But I would take that as a starting point, that there are those who think, well, English is enough, but your customers think differently.
Yeah, exactly. Spend some time thinking about this. Maybe we can pull up that slide we just had about understanding the context of 21. So why is it particularly relevant now to talk about this?
Yeah, exactly. And this is on the back of a presentation I did last week at a conference. And I'd like to say that this is not a new question. This is a question that companies have been asking way before in 2020 and for decades practically, right? So it's not necessarily a new problem, but what makes it's a little bit different, and the way you tackle this is the context where we are at right now in 2021. And we've all been there talking about the effects of the pandemic, but it has had an effect on how we as users and individuals, we engage with brands, we engage with content. So one of the first ones right there is this, with everyone being on lockdowns at home, started last year, we all started getting subscriptions for Netflix. Example, right? But there's this whole shift towards online and ordering takeaway or takeout in your mobile app, and all these examples of things we used to do live, now we're doing them online. Mm-hmm. So that is one of the first ones.
A super quick question, because I saw there in the comments that Tucker just pulled up that some people can't hear me. I don't know, can people hear me again?
We can hear you. We can hear you now. Okay. Just get right up there in that microphone. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, right. I'm still getting used to this new thing here. So I apologize. And I have a tendency to move around when I talk. I'm going to try to do that less.
Yeah, and thanks, guys, in the chat. Don't hesitate to let us know if we're screwing up over there in chat.
Yeah,
keep us honest.
Super helpful. Exactly. So that's appreciated. Thank you. Okay. So, it's true, Gabe. I mean, there's so much more happening online. All of us were already online, right? And so much was happening there. But in the last year, e-commerce experienced such a boost. Like, it was just ridiculous. What was it? I think the US e-commerce market had 10 years worth of growth in just 3 months. And so it basically broke all records and just exploded. And even if we all look at our personal lives, I mean, for me, I I've just been ordering so much more online because I moved country. I have a little human being here at home now that needs to be clothed, and well, all the stores are closed, right? So of course I need those things, and they need to get to my house somehow. So of course I order online, and I've never ordered more online than in the last year, and I'm just like one little person here, so. This is something that I love, that when sometimes we talk about the translation industry in the local life, and then everyone can kind of see like, oh yeah, this is happening. And of course I do have my app in my language. It's like, for me, a sign always that something is becoming a lot more mainstream when literally everyone is experiencing this as well, right? And it's not just in our little universe anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it's a thing. Like we take language for granted, don't we? Like the availability of all these services, of all these products, and that's I feel, and something I wanted to touch on a little bit later is how the industry is coming out of the shadows in a way, and at the same time, the professionals in it, they still have the needs, and they feel they need to justify their existence. That's something I like to keep coming back to a lot, and having experienced this as a salesperson in the industry a number of years ago, there's always this, you always find clients who just think, well, English is good enough. Like, why are you even, what is it that you're selling to me? So there's this still, it's a topic that is relevant, especially because there's always these companies that have this mindset, and you want to convert them to the cause. Like, yeah, it's just a no-brainer to have content in various languages. It won't be applicable for everyone, but especially as we've talked about, like this shift towards online, and we're spending so much time on our devices, and that's another point, and another trend that is happening is a lot of the content, a lot of the interactions with brands are more and more mobile. So people spending more time on their mobile devices, and one of the reasons for that is, and especially in some parts of the world, mobile connectivity is cheaper than the internet. So you have places like Africa or Asia where you have just so many people connecting, and they will want to consume the content. So that is also one of the trends that we see happening.
Yeah, and again, this is something else I'm just relating this back to myself again, but still, I mostly buy things on apps on my phone. It's because it's just so much more convenient than having to go to your computer, and yeah, who does that anymore?
Really? Yeah, booting up your computer and all of that, right? And that's something we've seen. One of the data points we had in the main study we're using for this is when buying on the internet, already people are spending more time on their mobile devices as opposed to their desktops.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, even if people like shopping in brick and mortar shops, and we had a chat about this the other day, right? And those people who prefer that will get back to buying in shops as COVID restrictions start to lift. But the e-commerce is here to stay for sure.
Yeah, especially if you think about, because of the pandemic, so many more of the traditional everything reopens again, right? So that would make no sense. So even, yeah, I also personally look forward to going to a store again, but it doesn't mean I won't buy online anymore. So, and this is something I think we've seen in a lot of cases in the market, not just with e-commerce now, but that basically the pandemic has had an effect that it can expand our market as well. So last week I talked to Tucker about interpreting, where some people had to offer adjacent services. So not just interpreting, but maybe it was then captioning and document translation for conferences. Well, like after the pandemic, they're not going to get rid of this new service line now. So now they have interpreting services and those services. So maybe, and this is something I like to see, because even though the pandemic has been, well, horrible from a human level and challenging from a business perspective, hopefully we're going to come out stronger business-wise for the market. Yeah, we got some nice comments there. Tucker, can you show those again?
We do. I've just been trying to fix your audio. Sorry, that is completely on me, guys. But let me read through the comments here for you, because it's hard to get them all up on screen here. And thank you, everybody who's been commenting on the quality of the audio. Adi, over from Ghana.
Michael.
Hi, Adi. Long time no talk. We need to sync up. Anyways, thanks for these insights, Gabriel. Also, deciding whether or not to use only English could depend on the capacity and growth stage of an organization. I noticed some organizations try to use other languages while they aren't prepared enough, or maybe willing to invest adequately, and it leads to poor outcomes. Thank you, Adi. I'm not sure how that if that requires a response, and I'm sorry, I've got a parakeet here that is making a guest appearance. Natalia Pita Alvarez, I think there's trouble when you change the view. Oh, yeah, well, got it. Thank you, Natalia. That comment was actually very helpful. And last but not least here, what this is? Michael Reed. Oh, Michael, English is definitely not enough, and not just for the reasons of sales, but most importantly, for reasons of respect. Only 20% of the world has any English ability at all, and assuming that English can or should be a linguistic panacea isn't just incredibly problematic in terms of people's rights to their language, it's problematic in terms of reality and linguistic inclusion. Thank you, Michael. All right.
Yes, absolutely. And I think something that we keep forgetting as well is, and I liked what you said, Gabe, earlier, that we take language for granted, right? That it's just there, available for us. And it's really only when it's not there that you realize that something is missing, that there should be a translation or an interpretation or something like that.
If it's not there, or if there's something wrong with it, right? Like we keep talking to all of these professionals from different corners of the industry, and when everything goes smooth, no one says anything about language, about localization, because no one notices it if it's done correctly. But then the mistake comes up, and oh boy, those can be nasty. So
exactly right. I mean, a translation should never sound like a translation. That's the worst thing that can happen. It should sound like the original. Or like, I'm a trained interpreter, and we were always told as well that, well, you only really get noticed as an interpreter if you make a mistake, which sounds demotivating, but isn't really. I mean, you're basically doing a good job when nobody is, paying particular attention to you, when they're just receiving the interpretation. Yeah. But oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to pick up on one of those comments that I liked very much about the maturity of the companies, right? And then them not being ready for including all of these languages, and that leading to inefficiencies or investment going out of the window. It's certainly true, and I think that betrays something else, where depending on the maturity of the company and where they are at, I think it needs to start with understanding what it is that they do and what is their strategic focus, because there's a lot of merit, and this kind of goes back to the overarching "is English enough?" question. And maybe I would caveat Michael's comment there that sometimes it is enough, and that depends on where your company is at. If you're servicing a monolingual English markets and your audience is white males, then English-speaking white males, then maybe that's enough. But even in countries such as the United States, you have huge segments of the population who speak a language other than English, and they at least need to consider Spanish, and then potentially Korean, Chinese, Japanese, right? So you need to understand who your target audience is and what it is that you want to do. Maybe a company is perfectly fine with just conquering its domestic market, but even then, for the reasons I just mentioned, you should at least consider different language versions of the service you provide.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's take another look at some of the other slides you brought with you, Gabe. And because you have more data for us, no?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh yeah, let's talk about the underwear effect quickly.
Yeah, like we've been talking about this for 20 minutes, right? And how language is personal. Like we don't think about it, right? We just act in our language. We just think in our language. I'm a bad example in this, in that I tend to reason in English in a lot of the things that I do, or right. But imagine situations where, and I like this example, is when you hit your foot on the, against the table leg. In what language do you swear? What is it for you, Sarah? Do you swear in German, or?
I'm a bad example too. I
Okay.
do it in English but I lived in an English speaking country for 9 years, so I've completely, like, it's inception here now for me,
Yeah,
and it's really nice to swear in English, so that's why.
it rolls off your tongue, right, doesn't it?
Yeah,
But
exactly.
I mean, for others, it's you do it in your own language. And I'll use a different example, which in this case I use my native language, which is Slovak. When I'm doing mental math, and I don't bust out a calculator, I'm just doing the basic math in my own language. So
Yeah, that's the same for me. Math
yeah.
has to be in German.
Yeah, exactly, right. So this is kind of maybe two different examples. There's many others, right? It's when you're performing some of these kind of natural things and doing your, living your life, then it's the default mode for most of us. And the two of us are a bad example, right? But for most of us, we reason in our native language. And this is what we refer to as the underwear effect. And it's been a term coined by Nimdzy's co-founder, Renato Beninato, kind of explaining this logic of when we are at our most private or most personal, so hint, wearing nothing but our underwear, the decisions we make, and when it comes to buying, and because we're talking about a business environment, right? The decisions around buying, we are making them in our language.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. But I mean, even though you and I are bad examples, I still have examples where also for me, it has to be in German in certain cases. And especially when I first moved to Ireland, and whenever something got emotional at first. And I mean, beyond just swearing briefly, but really trying to explain deeper emotion, it was very hard for me to put that into English. I had to adapt over time. My husband is Irish, so it's the only way I could communicate with him was English, right? But it was so frustrating. I did not like it at all in the beginning. So I feel like it resonates with me still on that level, that the more and more personal it gets, the like deeper it hits home somewhere, it has to be in your own language, in your own culture as well, to take it one step further, right? Language and culture, we know that, of course, is so close connected. Yeah, that's why, that's why also for me it's still important that my husband also speaks some German, because there's always otherwise a part of me I can't show him, even if we perfectly communicate in English. But that's kind of not the point, right? It has to go a step further than that.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. It's extremely personal, and that is the case we wanted to make with the study we ran. We called it the Project Underwear. Going back to what we were saying about the maturity of the companies, and at some point they need to face the realization that they want to connect with their users, and they know this even before they start thinking about language. You see all of those ads and how people want to reflect the values of the user and want to connect with the user and speak to the person's emotions. They already know this, but they do not add language into the equation. So inevitably, yeah, they come to the point where they need to consider it.
And do you think sometimes that is also because of what you already said, that we take language for granted? That's why maybe if you're not working in this industry, that sometimes it's not the first thing on people's minds because, well, we take it for granted, or what do you think? This is more of a
Yeah,
personal question rather than a
yeah,
research-based one.
yeah. There might be some of it. I mean, if I'm looking at it from a business angle, then a company's logic of wanting to make money and generate revenue in a target market, which eventually this all boils down to that one fact. The business element there is Oh my goodness, I'm drawing a blank. I lost my train of thought, but it's been a long day. Yeah, what was your question? I'm sorry.
Oh, I just said, do you think because that sometimes people who aren't part of the language industry, they might not think about language because we take language for granted all the time?
I understand now what I remember now what I was gonna say, and that is that language is difficult to quantify in terms of business metrics that companies reason in. And you can create formulas for I'm going to grow my user base and I'm going to have so many clicks or click-through rate of X and so much engagement, and there's always ways to transform that in some sort of monetary value. But if you think about language, it gets murkier a lot quicker. Like how, and this is something that language professionals and those who are in this business struggle with, is how do we justify the return on investment? And for a lot of these companies, I feel it's because it's not obvious. It's an opaque equation. Like, okay, what does investing in language bring me? Then that may be conditioning the way they approach it.
Yeah, and actually, so we talked to a lot of localization buyers as well, right? We have this lessons in localization series that we publish on Nimdzi, where we talk to companies and how they approach localization, from the buyer perspective. And now I kind of lost my train of thought. Damn it! Sorry about that. Something that you said last year triggered something for me.
Yeah, the business decisions and how considering language and localization may be opaque.
Nice.
Like, how do you relate that to figures that speak to business stakeholders?
Yeah. So what I really liked from our lessons in localization series is that there were a bunch of companies we talked to who were a bit more mature, maybe on that side, who when we asked them maybe about what is the return on investment for you, and their main goal was just the customer experience, like what you talked about, connecting with their customers, so that it wasn't as closely about monitoring purely the sales and what are we putting in and what are we getting out monetary wise, but that for them it was all about connecting with the customer, like a really customer centric approach. And to me, that speaks to a more mature approach when it comes to localization.
Absolutely, and we were talking about the maturity of the companies. Like there is this realization that it's about the experiences you want to create, and this is one of the elements I had on that first slide of mine. I was saying like it's a crowded market. There's a lot of companies vying for our attention, even though there are millions of us, and I'm kind of using the us as individuals, as end users. There's so many of us, but there's so many companies, and you want to stand out. And how do you stand out is by making that connection. And and brands already have that reflex, but it's in the discussions we've had, and the lessons in localization are a good example of the series we're running at Nimdzi, is that a lot of these companies were a step ahead. They are trying to see how can you integrate language and the language element, the translation element, the localization element into the overall, let's make sure the user experience is as good as it can be. And that's where a lot of work and a lot of effort is concentrated for these companies.
Yeah, because if you think about it, like you said, there's an abundance of everything, really. Yeah. And so if a user is confronted with a choice of, I don't know, I have two companies more or less offering the same thing, and one is in my language and one isn't, well, then, I'm going to be lazy about it and choose the one that I understand right away, rather than the one where I need to make an effort to sort of figure out what it says. And especially if it's, I don't know, I'm sitting on the couch in the evening, sipping my glass of wine while I'm trying to watch something, right? Everyone's double screening these days.
And you have the baby then I just want to, as well.
Yeah, in my underwear, and I want to find a product, and then, I don't want to, like, I'm already splitting my attention. I don't want to have to split even more. And, I want something that speaks to me right away.
Yeah, absolutely. And we haven't even touched on that on our whole attention span, it dwindling down, like of us as individual users. Like there's so many impulses coming from all of the sides, from vying for our attention. Is the apps, is it's a television, it's what have you. So it's the easy way out as users to kind of default again into our language. And this is and you touched on this, and this was one of the slides I had there. If you can flip to it, Tucker, the third one, was that 91%. What we found is that 91% of users will get more interested, or would get more interested, if they understood what it is about that you're trying to sell to them, right?
Which makes sense, right? You want to know what you're buying. I mean,
Yeah,
usually.
It's your money, right? 20 bucks is 20 bucks, and you want to invest them smartly most of the time, right? So, yeah. There's certainly the element of that you want. It's just a no-brainer. You want to understand this.
Yeah. And this is what the data tells us as well, right? Sometimes I look at these figures and I'm like, whoa, such a huge figure. And at the same time, it's like, yeah, like you said, it should be a no-brainer, right? Of course, people would want to understand what they're buying before they buy. I mean, that's usually at least a smart buying decision, right? So it shouldn't be a big surprise. But yeah, there, actually, speaking of surprises, in the research you've done, was there anything that you found surprising on the one end or the other? It doesn't matter, but
that's your trick question, right?
Right. Yeah.
There were a few, and I was going to hit on that, but this is a nice segue. You asking the question is that, we've been making the case here that you got to go with the native language. At the same time, I want to nuance this, saying like, sometimes it might be good enough for you. Like there may be use cases, or there may be countries where English is plain cool, right? It's the cool language.
Hell yeah.
And if you're already...
Like in Germany.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to unmute for that. Hell yeah.
Yeah.
So, and there's this element, something that we found, and I can kind of relate to as well, and being from, however bad an example I may be, but being from Central Eastern Europe, traditionally, and we've gone through stages, different stages in the country's history, and my country being Slovakia, where we've been part of the USSR, and the language of instruction has been Russian for so long. And then when the country gained its independence, there was this collective push and rejection towards all things Russian. So all of a sudden, like Russian practically from one day to another stopped being taught at school. And if it wasn't Russian back in those days, the second language was German. So starting with the 90s, it was all about English. Like English was the cool thing. Like you just needed to do English, right? And something that we found during the research as well was that for a lot of these countries, and like Slovakia, what we found was Lithuania and Latvia and these countries in more of the eastern parts of Europe, when we were asking the respondents to our surveys whether it's okay for them to buy in English, and they were like, yeah, pretty cool, like we don't mind. And one of the reasons there is that English is cool for people, especially the younger generations who kind of grew up on all of a sudden content being available in English and learning English and being exposed to the Western culture. There's also the element of, but that doesn't, to me, that does not explain it all, right? There's also the element of, there was this influx of foreign capital and Western capital, and a lot of the times English-speaking capital, right? So if we're talking about e-commerce, a lot of the times, and it's getting a little bit better now, but in a bunch of these countries, like there's not that many localized shopping experiences. I mean, you want to order something from Amazon in Slovakia, so it's still in English or in German, depending on which language you speak better, right? In the Czech Republic, you're starting to have a Czech version of Amazon. But there's also the lack of alternatives and shopping experiences. So that's why I'm kind of saying, like, overall, right, like the data paints a clear picture, like, yes, language, no brainer, go for it, right? At the same time, you want to pick your battles. If you're a company which has only so much budget to go with, and this is all about knowing who you want to target. Do you have different strategies for the market, different audiences in different markets? And also a hugely important aspect there is, learning how to prioritize content for localization. Like, you do not need to go all in. You can just maybe get away with the core user experience, customer journey type of content, which needs to be in the native language, but there's elements that can remain in English.
And that's also, I guess, why you need to really look at every individual market that you want to go into, because even things like the English Proficiency Index, which is a data point, that shows you how well people speak English and in a certain country, even that is not enough of an indicator sometimes, because like you said, for example, in the former USSR countries, sorry, I keep messing up the name because it's of course different in German, and here we go, I know it better in German, but anyway, in like the Czech Republic and Slovakia, maybe English came in later, but people are a lot more accepting of it. But then at the same time, so I don't know what the English proficiency level is there right now, but people often like, I'm German, I live in Germany now. People are like, oh, Germans speak English really well. And on the English Proficiency Index, I think we're fairly high. I don't know exactly.
Right.
But, well, even here, I mean, first of all, also, at least the eastern part of Germany also did not have English until the 90s, right? So that's a big part of the population. They also learned Russian. And then you have, like, even Germany is a weird market. On the one hand, English is really cool. Yeah. So everyone wants to speak English. And we even have products like this. Yeah. A mobile phone in German. We call this a handy. Yeah. Which doesn't make sense in English, but English is so cool that we just make up English words for products sometimes just to make them sound cooler. At the same time, though, Germany is one of those markets where you should really offer your product in German if you want to reach people. So it's not always as black and white when you just purely look at the data without really looking deeper into the market.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a comment I make a lot of times. Like, it's, the 91%, almost forget about it. Like the one I just mentioned, or the 9 users out of 10 that I mentioned at the beginning, just forget about it. You need to go beyond that number and really understand your target audience. There's so many elements. There is the English proficiency, and based on that, you would assume that Scandinavians, all they care about is talking in English, right? But no, they don't. Same for Germans, Dutch people, and so on. So English proficiency. There's also the history and tradition of the countries. Like I mentioned, the example of the Eastern kind of European sphere, right? But India is another fascinating example where, and there's this colonial history where for so long English has been the language of the empire practically, right? And it's still a socially kind of well viewed normative thing to be conversing in English. So there's the element of culture, tradition, history, and all of that kind of blends together in what it is that, like, what languages you use. But to your point, and this is a fairly kind of recent take. I was just interviewing a buyer side person, a localization manager at an IT company last week. And she made a very interesting point that stuck with me, is that probably English can get you so far, in that you have in countries like maybe Germany or Scandinavia, you tolerate English and you can get by with it. But if a company has a product which requires a deep knowledge and understanding of the product, and you have the power users and you have the subject matter experts, at one point English will not be good enough, and when they are kind of going into this high level of instruction and knowledge of the product, they will want to learn it and master it in their native language. So that's what she was telling me. Like, their practice was, with certain elements, it was good enough to have them in English. But when they were starting to get into the user manuals and the knowledge-based type of content, training videos, like, no, that needed to be in German or Dutch or whatever it was. So there's layers and layers to this, really.
Yeah, exactly. So as soon as it goes deeper, And I even recall, like, and it's not just about older generations or, you know, people only started learning English later, like we just said, you know, maybe English in some regions only entered in the 90s. Yeah. But it's also like some of my friends or people I went to college with who all studied languages. Yeah. And who were generally super hyped about languages. There were nights where we wanted to watch a movie and everyone was like, ugh, can we just watch this in German? I just want to relax. You know, it was like, I don't want to really use my brain that deeply right now. I just want to chill, so please give it to me in my language, because I want to, you
Exactly.
know, lie back and not have to work so hard with my brain right now.
Yeah, exactly. It just let's and that's a very very valid argument. Like it's just mentally draining, you know, to kind of wield different languages and speak and think in different languages. It requires for most of the people, it requires a whole kind of different mental effort to get the jokes, to get the cultural nuances and whatnot. And I had that as well. Like it was when I was in France back during my study days, it was cool to with our group of friends to watch English movies because that was fun, and you know people had a kick out of trying to understand what it was about. But then they were like after some points on a booze infused evening, like no, let's just watch French movies.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, and this is you bringing it back into the business world as well. You know, you might get by on your business call, your meeting in English, and then afterwards you walk out the room maybe and you go, "Phew," you know, now I can finally speak in my language again, and it's easy. Before it might still have been fun and everything, but you know, you had to work harder at it, and you don't want to work hard when you're buying something. You know.
Yeah. A lot of the times when I mean, this is not what I'm saying is not backed up by any kind of data, but people are looking for simplicity. I would say, you know, you want to, and
Yeah,
oftentimes you want to reach a decision quick enough. You want to get the gist of it real quick, not overthink it. And in such cases, the language or if your company addresses you in your native language, that hits home much quicker.
absolutely.
You know,
Not to mention, even like for me, I mean, again, bringing this home to me right now, but for example, something that really hits home with me is not just when it's in German, but when it's in my regional dialect. Like
mm,
that is like I will almost immediately buy. You know, like it's just if you
yeah,
address me in my regional dialect, then I'm hooked. You know, a product from my region, um, like that is something because that's really where my cultural connection is. Not so much I don't identify with the overall big German culture, but with my regional one, yeah, I do. And that is very, very personal. And so I love anything that is like localized into my little trash dialect that we have in this region. We're known for being a little trashy, I have to admit, but that's what I love about it as well, is my peeps, you know?
yeah.
So yeah. So
That's
I
a
think even more personal again. Yeah.
yeah, that's a very good comment, and this is something we have actually data for as well at MIMSI. Uh, we're kind of when we're talking about this, and even the topic of this conversation is English good enough, we're kind of assuming the direction of the discussion is English to language X, right?
Yeah,
But let's just kind of remember that English speaking users are also users and customers, right? So it also, goes in other directions, like French to English or German to English, Japanese
yes.
to English. So these people, they have the exact same kind of view and problems, right, so to speak.
Mhm.
So one of the things that we asked during when we were doing the research is that how receptive were people in different English-speaking countries like Ireland or the UK, Canada, Australia, to companies using or playing with, as you mentioned, the different variants of languages, like
Mhm.
British English, in the US, or maybe Australian English in Canada, and so on. And it was pretty overwhelming, like the sentiment, this feedback was that users appreciate it. More than half of the users were, I think it was 53% who said, yes, we like this. Like they view it positively if a brand makes that kind of effort.
Yeah.
And
Because
yeah,
oh, sorry. Because you reach people differently in different markets, even if they speak the same language, right? Like we said before, also in the US, it's okay. We're just gonna go there, and it's more like selling dreams, right? It's all positive adjectives and whatever. Whereas in other markets, I don't know, this is again Germany now, it's more like facts and data, like being cliche here, but it's kind of like that. And it's a little bit different also, I lived in Ireland, and if a US company came in with their way of selling, like the way they sell in the US, the Irish would, I don't want to speak for all the Irish, but they would also go like, ugh, all these buzzwords from the US,
Exactly.
like that. It's like, it doesn't hit home.
Yeah, I have another example that I very much like, and that's because I spent so much time in studying, working in France, is that so everyone uses the stereotypes, right? Baguette, beret, that Eiffel Tower. That's the cliche when you're talking to a Frenchman. But and generally the French are not very enthused about the use of these stereotypical kind of imagery. But at the same time, when we ask them, they like that when this is done smartly and in a respectful manner. If brands are able to incorporate that into their messaging or their videos and their advertisements, those have success. They like what makes them French, so to speak, like the French.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I can relate to that a little bit also from the German side. I don't like all the cliche of the Lederhosen and Weißwurst and blah. People would assume, oh, what do you miss most in Germany, Sarah? Is it beer and sausages? And it's like, no, it's bread. It's definitely bread. Ask any German abroad, it's bread. The answer is always bread.
Yeah.
Yeah, but aside from that, we often the main cliche that's associated with your country is not something that you are that proud of, or that you can associate with. At the same time, yeah, if someone does it in a smart, funny way or in a clever way, then it's kind of cool again, because then you also realize that they take it a level deeper, right? That they understand that, and then they can really connect with the users. But yeah, I liked something you said earlier as well, that we tend to assume that English is the default, and then that we go from English into other languages. Yeah. And that often is the case, unfortunately, I have to say as well. But, and I don't know if you've had that before. People sometimes ask me if I'm a native speaker, and I'm like, yeah, a native speaker of German, though. I am a native speaker of a language.
Yeah,
Just
exactly.
not, I assume you mean an English native speaker, yes? So, no, I'm not. But, even like in the way we're having conversations, and then if you bring that into business as well, in a lot of cases it is English to something else, and then again to something else. But in conversations we've had, especially for the NIMSY 100, talking to media localization companies, there's a lot happening in Asia, not just in the media area, but I remember some conversations from there where they're saying there was a lot more demand now for Asia to Asia content. I think this probably relates to other industries as well. And that there was a new challenge coming with that, of finding the right translators as well, because so far usually the default would have been, again, taken Asian language X into English and then that into Asian language Y. Whereas, of course, ideally you lose a lot going this extra angle, and also costs more, of course. So I think we'll see a lot more demand for like going in between languages that
Absolutely.
are like without the English step.
Absolutely, yeah. It's reasonable to expect the volume they're growing. I have my own kind of personal experience. This like 10 years ago when I was in the video game localization, and MMOs were all the rage. So those big online multiplayer type of games with thousands of people in them, and they are still big, but maybe people are talking about them less than 10 years ago. Now it's all about mobile games, but. A hotbed for this genre of games was Asia. So a lot of Chinese games, a lot of Korean games or Japanese games, mainly Chinese and Korean maybe. And I remember talking to clients back then about can you translate from Chinese to Korean or from Korean to Japanese for us? And us Western localizers, we were like, yeah, sure, right? So we were kind of dodging the questions then. It was never straightforward. And I don't think that has changed much. The demand is still there, but this to me like shows the the whole complexity of wanting to retain the cultural nuances. And if you're going from Korean to English and then from English to Japanese, you're losing artifacts along the way, right? In the language.
Absolutely. Like you would lose so much. And then again, and you have the extra business cost. You're doing it twice, you know, you could just do it once. So, okay. We have one last slide. I think Tucker pulled it up earlier already. I don't know if there's still, do you still want to say a few words about that?
Oh, yeah.
Gabe?
I mean, we can
bring us home.
We can, use it to guide us support, right? Localization, I mean, that's the takeaway. Localization can convince users. Language, having content available in your language, that is a very convincing argument. On this graphic here, what we're showing are the different levels of acceptance and of interest, let's say, depending on which country you're in, and the availability of something in English as opposed to in the native language. So you'll always need to take a measured and market by market, audience by audience approach, but by and large, and yes, language helps drive user engagement, and ultimately growing user engagement that transforms into sales. And in business environments, that is what companies are now doing this for charity, right? So there's always a monetary figure attached to it. So yeah, localization can drive sales.
And so this graph right there, it's the question behind it is, would you buy a product if it's only in English? Yeah, and then it's no, it's unlikely I buy, and it's likely I buy.
Yeah. So you see the different levels of tolerance there, and as we were talking about the English level proficiency, English language proficiency, you kind of ponder that as well. You see the Asian countries not being very receptive if they see something in English. It's all about that user experience, about the customer journey, and a lot of these companies are insisting more and more on that. It's the impact you're making, it's the experiences you create, and that is one of our takeaways as well. Is language is absolutely part of those user experiences that you create.
Absolutely. Maybe for a final thought before we sign off for today, I might be putting you on the spot, so I'm sorry, but you knew what you signed up for, Gabe.
Yeah.
So,
I knew what to expect. Yeah.
Yes. I have a question behind that. Sorry.
Oh, okay,
that was just my warning statement to you. So relating this to translators, also interpreters, maybe more translators in this case, I guess. What does this mean to them? Because we talk about the industry, we talk about business, and behind all of that are many, many linguists. So why is this important for them?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. What I like to answer to that is it's about translators and individual linguists understanding they have a vital role to play in this ecosystem. So many times we're just talking about businesses or brands and end users and revenue and growing the user base, but linguists have they have a very, very vital role in ensuring that even happens. And so there is the element of understanding and awareness that yes, that is the case, that the data shows that users are more receptive, engage more with localized content. But who is behind that? Those are the hard workers of our industry, the translators, the interpreters who make this happen. So yeah, that's my answer to that. You're a vital part of our ecosystem, and be mindful of that. Do not forget that.
Perfect. I like these as the closing words. And yeah, thank you so much for the conversation, Gabe. This was a really lovely conversation, and we don't spend enough time, chatting about these topics. So it was great to have you as a guest today, so that we can, use this time to have a real conversation. Maybe we'll have you back soon. For now. Yeah, we'll be back next Monday, a new guest at Last Week in Localization, and I'll be back here. And yeah, see you. Same time, same channel.